is likely to further escalate tensions between the two countries. CNN's Clarissa Ward joins us now with more. What's this about, Clarissa?
Well, according to the Trump administration, this is essentially about the fact that they view Zarif, the foreign minister who speaks fluent English, who is very outspoken, who travels around the world, very skillfully putting forward Iran's point of view. They view him as essentially being a sort of pawn for the Iranian government and specifically for the Ayatollah Khamenei. And we heard yesterday from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He said, quote, "This action represents another step toward denying the Iranian regime the resources to enable terror and oppress the Iranian people. Foreign Minister Zarif, a senior regime official and apologist, has for years now been complicit in these malign activities." Well, it didn't take long for us to hear back also from Zarif himself. He fired back with a somewhat sarcastic message on Twitter saying, "Thank you for considering me such a huge threat to your agenda." But what's really interesting here is the timing of this, because it was just a few weeks ago that Zarif visited New York. He sat down with some journalists, including our own Fareed Zakaria, and he gave the first real indication that possibly, or the first hint that possibly the U.S. might consider renegotiating the nuclear deal between Iran and the U.S. If that's the case, Zarif would be the front man of those negotiations. And so what kind of a message is now being sent by the Trump administration by trying to push him out? Who becomes the person then that the U.S. would hold those negotiations with? John?
Key questions. Clarissa Ward, thank you very, very much. All right, we have a big morning ahead here from Detroit. 4 more presidential candidates will join us right here. What did they think about their performances? That's next.
Fitz should use them for their campaign ads.
And rhyming with Jay Inslee is not easy. I'll just say that.
All right, we have 2 presidential candidates coming up in just minutes. New Day continues right now.
The first thing that I'm going to do when I'm president is I'm going to Clorox the Oval Office.
We need a conversation about what's happening now.
If you cross the border illegally, you should be able to be sent back. It's a crime.
Mr. Vice President, it looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't. Let me begin by telling you.
He was able to get the lines in, escape unscathed. He brought himself a new lifeline. He will be back.
Barack Obama knew exactly who I was. He chose me, and he said it was the best decision.
You couldn't get his central message about what he wants to do for this country. That isn't good enough for 2020.
This is New Day. Allison Camerata and John Berman.
Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. This is a special edition of New Day. We are live in Detroit. It is the morning after. The morning after the Democratic debate. It was bruising here on CNN, particularly for former Vice President Joe Biden. Just about every other candidate on the stage was attacking one aspect of Biden's record or another. But unlike the first round of debates, you got the sense that Joe Biden was ready. Some of the analysis this morning you will hear, maybe he didn't thrive, but he survived. And one key question we will ask is he a stronger frontrunner this morning or a weaker frontrunner than he was going in?
Senator Kamala Harris came out swinging, and she landed some blows on Biden, but she had a tougher time last night when she was the target. Harris was challenged on her new health care plan and her record as a prosecutor. So we have a lot of key moments from the night 2 face-off to show you and dissect. So let's begin with CNN's Athena Jones. She joins us now with the highlights. Athena.
Good morning, Allison. As we all expected, Joe Biden was the top target on the stage that night, taking fire from all sides on everything from health care to tough on crime laws, women in the workplace, immigration, trade, climate change. As promised, the vice president was more aggressive in fighting back last night. He delivered a steadier performance, if not a spectacular one, as compared to that first debate in Miami.
Cozy on me, kid.
It didn't take long for Senator Kamala Harris and all of the Democratic rivals on stage to pounce on former Vice President Joe Biden.
Mr. Vice President, you want to be president of the United States. You need to be able to answer the tough questions.
Mr. Vice President, your argument is not with me, it's with science. And unfortunately, your plan is just too late.
If you want to compare records, and frankly, I'm shocked that you do, I am happy to do that.
Mr. Vice President, you didn't answer my question.
But Biden came swinging too.
I have guts enough to say his plan doesn't make sense. You can't beat President Trump with double talk.
The former vice president slamming Harris's health care plan, bringing back one of his old catchphrases.
So this idea is a bunch of malarkey, what we're talking about here. I don't know what math you do anywhere in California, but I tell you, that's a lot of money.
Harris hitting back.
Your plan, by contrast, leaves out almost 10 million Americans. So I think that you should really think about what you're saying.
After Senator Cory Booker brought up Biden's support of a controversial crime bill in the 90s, Biden lashing out.
The bill he talks about is a bill that in our administration we passed. We passed that bill that you added on to. That's the bill, in fact, you passed. And the fact of the matter is, secondly, there was nothing done for the entire 8 years he was mayor. There was nothing done to deal with the police department that was corrupt.
Mr. Vice President, there's a saying in my community, you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor. You need to come to the city of Newark and see the reforms that we put in place. This isn't about the past, sir. This is about the present right now.
Former Housing Secretary Julian Castro also sparring with Biden on decriminalizing border crossings.
If you cross the border illegally, you should be able to be sent back. It's a crime.
First of all, Mr. Vice President, it looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't. Let me begin by telling you.
Biden wasn't the only one taking jabs from the other contenders. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard slammed Senator Harris's record as a prosecutor.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work.
Some 2020 hopefuls were tired of talking about the past.
This is the fourth debate that we have had, and the second time that we have been debating what people did 50 years ago with busing, when our schools are as segregated today as they were 50 years ago. We need a conversation about what's happening now.
Political outsider Andrew Yang implored his rivals to stop attacking each other and instead take aim at President Trump.
We're up here with makeup on our faces and our rehearsed attack lines, playing roles in this reality TV show. It's one reason why we elected a reality TV star as our president. We need to be laser focused on solving the real challenges of today.
Now, the question now is who, if anyone, will get a meaningful and lasting bump in support and fundraising and in the polls from their debate performance. Meanwhile, several of the candidates we saw on stage last night are staying here in this area today for campaign events. Biden has an event at a restaurant in Detroit. Harris has a union event in the afternoon, and Cory Booker has an organizing event. Allison?
Okay, Athena, thank you for playing us all of those highlights. Really helpful for us to talk about it. So joining us now are Mitchell Andrew, CNN political commentator and the former mayor of New Orleans, Terry McAuliffe, CNN political commentator and former governor of Virginia. We have Dennis Archer, the former mayor of Detroit, and Lavora Barnes, the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party. Great to have all of you. Mayor Landrieu, I want to start with you because you sent out a tweet. I don't know if it was before the debate or during, but I just want to read a portion of it. You say, the Dem debate participants must remember that our ultimate goal is to defeat Donald Trump. Our policy differences are minor compared to the contrast with Donald Trump. I'm not sure they got the memo.
Well, maybe they did because they were fierce competitors, as they should be. But I would just say again, you know, the general advice is you got to beat Trump. And in order to govern, you got to win.
Right, but too much infighting. I mean, did you feel there was too much infighting, friendly fire last night?
No, I think in both debates, everybody was as soft on the people as they could, but hard on the promise to prosecute their case. And I think everybody's record is in play. But I think they have to remember at the end of the day when they're fighting about health care to remember to say the Republicans are trying to take away our health care and we're trying to give it to you and then talk about the specifics. But I thought it was a pretty aggressive debate last night. And I think a couple of people shined and a couple of people didn't, just like the night before.
Well, okay. Who shined?
I think Cory Booker shined last night, Julian Castro, Michael Bennet. I actually think the vice president is going to have done a lot better than people thought. He showed up. Everybody threw every kind of punch at him. Not only was he still standing, he kind of gave back a little bit more. I was a little bit surprised at Kamala Harris. I thought she was a little bit less than she was in the first debate. And I agree that after this debate, the herd is going to start getting thin fairly quickly. So by the time we get to September, probably only 10 of these candidates are going to be standing on that stage.
Lavora, you were nodding a lot on the issue of taking on President Trump. I don't want to let that slide. Why were you giving such affirmation to the notion that perhaps they should have been focused there?
We have to beat him, right? They all did their homework. They were all ready to come and talk about issues and talk about each other's issues. But we need to talk a little bit more about what Donald Trump has done to this nation and to the state and to this city and how we're going to win and how we're going to beat him. And the way they can each beat him is to begin talking about those issues now, not wait until they've won a nomination to talk about them. Talk about them now. We should all be talking about
So
it.
when you saw that as the head of the Michigan Democratic Party, were you sort of cringing at some of the friendly
I wanted
fire?
to shout a little bit. I'm not allowed to shout from the audience, apparently, I learned, but I wanted to shout a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what the Republicans have done. These issues are real when you're talking about healthcare, just like Mitch said. Why aren't you talking about what the Republicans have done healthcare rather than going back and forth on the tiny differences in your healthcare plan?
What do you think they were thinking?
I think that they were thinking, let me tell my story. I need to get my story out. I need to make sure people understand my position and how I differ from my friends on the stage. And I get that. That's part of the job. But the big job here is beating Donald Trump.
Governor, your take.
I think Joe Biden did what he had to do last night. Listen, they all went after him. I mean, it was all the candidates went after him. He knocked off most of the arguments against him. So, listen, he moves on. He's still the front runner. I agree. I think Kamala was a tough attack by Congresswoman Gabbard on her. We had candidates. But I agree. We got to now get into very specific issues of how we're going to make people's lives better. That first 20 minutes on health care was mind-numbing. Yeah. I don't think any American watched it and said, well, I know what's going to happen now. We got to be very explicit. How are we going to bring prescription drug prices down? People are going to start voting in 5 months. This is not too far away. The early vote starts in January. And we got to start laying out a positive, specific agenda. And I agree. I mean, look what Trump's done to health care. Right. I mean, he took away the individual mandate. He brought uncertainty to the market. In Virginia, some policies went up 62%. He owns the problems with health care in this country. Let's make sure he owns it.
They
not
never
the
mentioned
Democrats.
pre-existing conditions last night, nor did they mention the fact that I think Cory Booker may have that the president's team right now is at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, federal court, trying to strip health care away by destroying the Affordable Health Care Act. So I think I think the governor's right about being more precise about what the president has done to take away people's health care rather than arguing about the details of how we're going to give it to them.
Mayor, your takeaways from last night.
I thought everybody wanted to show something about them that people would remember. For example, the Kool-Aid observation.
Did you understand the Kool-Aid observation? There's been a lot of controversy on our set this
Listen,
morning.
I've been around a long time.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything about Kool-Aid observation. That's not something that I'm familiar with. I admit that I don't know everything, but that's one thing I've not heard whatsoever.
Okay. So was not an effective argument for you.
Well, everybody did what they had to do. I'm just delighted that you all have done just a fabulous job in terms of having people on talking about the issues. Then we saw the candidates last night, and I agree with both Mitch and the governor. When you start thinking about what Joe Biden did, you think about all of the people that he's helped on that stage in terms of winning their respective elections and what he's done for the country. And he took a whole lot of body blows but stood tall. We've got great candidates to offer to make sure that in 2020, we take back the White House. And we're going to do it, but we've got to do it in such a way that you don't alienate your friends. Because if you go after Biden in such a way that people think that you're going after President Obama, you then have an impact on voters of color because they're not going to go with that, and you run the risk of staying home. Please remember what happened when President Obama was giving the State of the Union, and Congressman Wilson called the president a liar during his remarks. That really hurt them. And because people came out, you go to barbershop, beauty shop, you're subject to get your beat if you start talking about President Obama. That's the same kind of thing that we need at the end of the day to bring everybody out. We need to make sure that everybody's energized to keep 45 from getting a reelection.
Let me just say the mayor's right on the attack. The first hour of attacks on Biden were Obama policies on the issue of health care and deportation. President Obama has a 95% approval rating in the Democratic Party. So when you go after his policies, you're going after President Obama. And that was tricky. And that's why I think those first attacks on Biden just plain didn't work.
And one of the other things they could have stated this may be too obvious. We're actually in the great city of Detroit that 6-7 years ago was really on its back. By the way, like New York was in 1976. And President Obama and Vice President Biden and the federal government came to this great city, said it's important, said diversity is a strength, and helped it stand back up, just like they did in the city of New Orleans. They would never say about New Orleans and Detroit what President Trump has said about Baltimore. And that message that gets sent out is, we don't care about you, we're leaving you behind, and by the way, you're less than human. Democrats and really most Americans understand that that is not who we are as a country. And Detroit, Mr. Mayor, has done a beautiful job this week and has really acquitted themselves really well. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, doesn't this city look great?
Yep.
This is terrific.
And you hear everyone talking about that who's coming to visit this week. Lavora, to that point, and I'm thinking about Macomb County. I'm thinking about Michigan, the swing state. I'm thinking about the counties in this swing state that are swing counties. And one of the things that I'm hearing this morning is, well, if President Obama was too far right for the Democratic Party, what does that say about the Democratic Party? How would you respond to that as the chair of the party in this state?
President Obama is not too far right for the Democratic Party. The thing that we have to do is we have to talk about the issues that matter, the kitchen table issues that matter to everyone in this state and in this country. And we need to talk about them at the same time we're talking about the urban issues that are important, the same time we're talking about clean water, the same time we're talking about health care, the same time we're talking about all of those issues that matter to all of us. And what we have to do is do it all. And one of my concerns is that we're trying to separate so that we are either talking to the voters of Macomb or we're talking to the voters of Detroit. We've got to talk to everybody. And we have to have the same message for everybody because we've all been marginalized by this president. We've all been separated by him into categories. And we need to come together and be talking about all these issues that work for all of us.
I'll tell you, I was surprised last night that a number of the candidates on that stage did not bother to say what the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has suppressed coming out of the United States Senate. You're talking about, for example, infrastructure. Our newly elected governor, Gretchen Whitmer, outstanding. She's doing a great job. Fix the damn roads was her message. Well, all across the United States, if there was not a meeting in the Hay Adams Hotel before the inauguration of President Obama, where Mitch McConnell made it very clear that Obama was going to be a one-term president, you think about all the programs that could have been implemented, but he stopped them. Right now, he's got a number of issues before him in the United States Senate that's been passed by the House, and they blocked them. What that says to me is if we want help, if we want change, we've got to make change across the board, and we want somebody who's got the wisdom, the knowledge, and the experience to make sure that that happens. And we also have to relieve Mr. McConnell of his job.
It sounds like you all think the candidates missed some opportunities on messaging last night. And so, Mayor, that leads us to what changed, if anything?
First of all, I think that's okay. This is a long campaign. It's too long. The debates were too long as a general matter. But they're gonna get better at what they do. You saw from the first debate, a lot of the candidates changed, and that's just kind of the horse race. And it's okay for them to go after each other if they just remember they actually have to think about beating President Trump. That is the one qualification that I think every Democrat is looking for, and they have to acquit themselves. As I said, the stage is going to get smaller in September. They're going to have a little bit more time to talk about each other. All of them are going to go back and look at the tape and think about things that they missed. But again, from our perspective, I think just stay focused on the prize. Beat President Trump. And whatever you have to do that, that's what we ought to be talking about. And by the way, pocketbook issues, infrastructure, health care, education, how to get a job, and so that you don't have to work 3 jobs and not being able to go to your kid's game and be able to pay your mortgage and pay your tuition. All of those things is what most Americans want across race, across class, and really across geography. And be nice to people and lift them up because diversity really is a strength. It's not a weakness. That's who we are.
Governor, you were talking about Joe Biden taking it from all sides during that debate, and you think he survived. There is a question this morning about the next one, because on the next debate, almost certainly he'll be there with Elizabeth Warren. And Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden, they've been at political odds for a long time. It's not a new thing. Do you think he'll be able to handle that? How will he handle that?
That's a good question. The next debate is going to be fascinating. I think people want to see the Biden-Warren matchup. I think if you look at the 2 debates that we had here, who was the big winner? I think Elizabeth Warren came out as a big winner. She talked about specifics. What I loved about Elizabeth Warren, like Cory Booker last night, she was a happy warrior. You looked at her, she's talking specific about issues. She can take on Donald Trump, and she can do it with a smile. So I think the next debate for Joe Biden is going to be, Warren's going to be in that, Sanders is going to be in that, and that's where he has to show that he has a plan for the future. I'm tired about hearing about the past. I don't want to hear about busing 4 years ago. I want to know today, what are you doing about fixing the damn roads? I want to know about bringing prescription drug prices down. And that's the challenge for us Democrats as we go forward. We got to get more specific into the issues. Let's stop the attack on one another. Now is the time to lay that positive agenda. We're going to beat Trump. There's no question. You look at Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We lost by 77,000 votes total. I remind you, 92 million people did not vote in 2016. They stayed home. A lot of them are not staying home. They're coming out. We're going to win Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Hard for Trump to win, but let's have a unified message. He's created chaos. Democrats will lift people up and fix it.
Friends, thank you very much for all of the analysis and your impressions. It's great to have you here with us this morning. And thanks for all the hospitality in Detroit.
And thanks to CNN for coming. The great job that you all have done.
Thank you for that message. All right. Meanwhile, we have 4 more presidential candidates who were on the stage last night. Coming up on our program, we have Senators Michael Bennet, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and Cory Booker. So stick around for all of that.
All right. Up first, Senator Michael Bennet. He had what many are calling a very strong debate performance. You heard it in this panel right here. Will that lead to a jump in the polls? Will it get him on the next debate stage? Here he is. We'll talk to him next.
For the last 3 years, we've been consumed by a president who frankly doesn't give a damn about your kids or mine. Mr. President, kids belong in classrooms, not cages. And they deserve something better than a bully in the White House.
That's Colorado Senator Michael Bennet going after President Trump directly at last night's CNN Democratic debate. A short time later, President Trump appeared to respond, falsely claiming that the policy of child separation has ended. Now, Senator Bennet joins us this morning. Senator, that statement you made, combined with many of the other things you said last night, seemed to indicate that you wish more of the focus in this discussion right now was on President Trump.
I think it's very important. I mean, he is the guy that's in the White House. In my view, he has violated every tenet of our democracy you can violate. And I think, as I said last night, just on the racism alone, every Democrat, Republican, Independent in this country should throw the guy out of here. And I think we do need to get our focus on.
So was there too much of the circular firing squad last night? Democrat on Democrat fighting.
It's early in our democratic discussion. Healthcare, I think, is a good example. My view on healthcare is that we passed the Affordable Care Act. We made a difference to a lot of people. We were on defense politically for 10 years. Then Mitch McConnell tried to repeal it. Trump tried to repeal it. We beat them, and we were on offense. And then Bernie right away then puts Medicare for all, and he introduces it. And a bunch of the presidential candidates sign up to be on it. And I think we're on defense again on healthcare, which is unbelievable to me because Donald Trump has spent his presidency taking health care away from millions of Americans. And that's where I think we should be drawing the line here.
We have a moment last night where you tried to talk more about health care, health insurance. So let's listen to that.
We need to be honest about what's in this plan. It bans employer-based insurance and taxes the middle class to the tune of $30 trillion. Do you know how much that is? That is 70% of what the government will collect in taxes over the next 10 years. We don't need to do that.
Governor, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I do want to
health care in this country.
I do want to bring in Senator Harris because he just suggested you were not being honest.
We cannot keep with the Republican talking points on this. You got to stop.
Were you saying that she wasn't being honest about it?
Well, I can tell you this. These weren't Republican talking points. This is Bernie Sanders' description of his own bill. Bernie said the other night, I wrote the damn bill, and he did. And he and I have very different views about where we should head on health care. He's got an ideological commitment to nationalizing our health insurance industry. And I understand that from his perspective. My view is that the American people want to make the choice for their families about whether they want to get insurance at their employer if they can, or whether they want a public option. Think about what Bernie's proposing in terms of the employees at CNN. If he got what he wanted, everybody at CNN would have to give up all the insurance you get at CNN and pay a massive tax for the privilege of giving that up.
And Senator Kamala Harris is on board with that, it sounds like to you.
Yeah, she is. And Elizabeth Warren is as well. That's not a position that will unite Democrats, much less allow us to win in 2020. And we don't need to do it. Instead, we should have a public option.
Senator Harris, her plan's a little different than the Sanders or Warren notion, because it would allow for essentially a Medicare Advantage option where you would be able to get a type of private insurance, maybe not your insurance. You don't like her plan either?
Well, there are a couple things. One, that's an answer on Medicare Advantage. So Bernie's plan takes Medicare Advantage away from 22 million older Americans who have Medicare Advantage and love it. So I think Senator Harris, in her latest iteration of her plan, has said, well, I'm going to let Medicare Advantage in some form remain. But she is still making insurance that you get at your employer illegal. And she's saying that it will take at least 10 years to get to universal health care in this country. You guys have seen what the debate has been over the last 10 years in health care. I mean, I think if we just have a public option, we can get to universal health care in this country in 2 years. So it seems to me that building on the Affordable Care Act, the work that we've already done, not taxing the middle class in this country at a rate that they will never accept is where we should head.
So how do you think last night went? Did you accomplish whatever you set out to do?
Yeah, I think it went well. I wanted to have the discussion about Medicare for all because I think it's very and the public option. I think it's important for people to understand that important distinction, certainly before we go into the general election. And I was glad to have some discussion finally about the importance of dealing with our education system in this country and the fact that, unfortunately, for kids today, our education system's reinforcing the income inequality that we have instead of liberating people from it, because the best predictor of the quality of your education is your parents' income. That is not the American way, and we need to change that.
Senator, the next debate requires a very high threshold for getting in, 130,000 individual donors at 2% in at least 4 polls. Where do you stand right now?
Well, we're not there yet, but on the other hand, and I think we will get there, I have always had tough races. You know, Colorado is a purple state. It's exactly a third Republican, Democratic, and Independent. I always barely win. And it's always a matter of one step in front of the other. And I think we actually are going to need to nominate somebody who's from the middle of the country, not from the coast. So I'm going to, as I always do, just try to outwork everybody, and I think we'll succeed.
You're almost wearing it as a badge of honor. I almost barely win.
It's true.
I know, I see a
but
pride
you know what?
here.
Actually, it's true. It's very different to have one of these jobs when you're in a state where, you know, it's deep, deep blue or it's deep red. It's very different when it's a third, a third, a third. And I actually think that it's one of the reasons why people in my state have so little patience with the partisan politics that we're seeing in Washington.
Do you think that some of this discussion, to that point, isn't reaching some of those voters who aren't on the extremes?
Well, for those voters, this thing hasn't even started yet. You know, for people that are raising their families, building their businesses, trying to do something useful for their community, this is not going to be something that they tune into for months. But every journey starts with a single step, and that's where we are today, I think.
Senator Michael Bennet, thanks so much for stopping by New Day. Great to have you. We'll be watching very closely.
Thank you.
Okay, she had one of the best zingers of the night. Here it is.
The first thing that I'm going to do when I'm president is I'm going to Clorox the Oval Office.
Did Senator Kirsten Gillibrand do enough to
talk to those white women in the suburbs that voted for Trump and explain to them what white privilege actually is? That when their son is walking down a street with a bag of M&Ms in his pocket, wearing a hoodie, his whiteness is what protects him from not being shot.
All right, that was New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand making the case that she can connect with voters of various backgrounds and ultimately build a coalition that would lead to her victory in 2020. And Senator Gillibrand joins us now. Welcome. Have you had any sleep from last night?
No.
Really none?
No, 4 hours.
Okay.
That's enough.
You had some memorable moments last night, as did, I think, most of the candidates on that stage. How do you think last night went?
I think it was a great opportunity for me to really talk about this false choice that I think the conversation is leading to, that you either have to have a progressive with a big idea or a moderate who can get those Obama-Trump voters. And the truth is you need somebody who can do both. And I think I laid out last night that I can do both and that I have done both electorally and legislatively. I bring people together and I get a lot done.
One of the big criticisms of the discussion right now in general in the Democratic field is you're not talking about President Trump enough. You're not taking on his policies enough. You're too focused on each other.
Well, I just finished a bus tour in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. It was called the Trump Broken Promises Bus Tour. And the purpose was to talk directly to those voters about all the broken promises Trump made, the fact that he lied to them about no bad trade deals. He's not only gotten us into a trade war with China, but he's entered into NAFTA 2.0, which is not good. It's a giveaway to drug companies in Mexico. The fact that he said he'd lower prescription drug prices. Under his presidency, they've only gone up. The fact that he said he wouldn't touch Social Security or Medicare, and Medicaid or Medicare, and he's really attacked them both at every budget he's had. So the truth is he's lied. And so the way to beat Trump, I showed them. You go directly into his backyard, talk directly to his voters about how he misled them and that he's not helping them. 10 miles from here in Warren, Michigan, another plant has closed. More jobs are being lost. I was in Youngstown, Ohio. I can tell you what it's like to be in a town where the community's been gutted and people have been laid off, some by text message. Others given 24 hours to decide whether to move to another state with their families just to keep a job.
But on the stage last night, was there too much friendly fire?
No, I think the nature of the questions were trying to get to the nitty gritty of policy. And one of the points I made is let's not lose the forest through the trees, because we as Democrats are trying to make sure people have health care as a right and not a privilege. And there's a lot of ways to get there. The Republican Party and President Trump is working on taking health care away from people, trying to tell insurers you don't have to cover people with pre-existing conditions.
On the friendly fire issue, on the issue of forest or trees, I think some critics will look at last night, and you did take on Joe Biden and something from his past. Let's play this moment where you were discussing an op-ed that he wrote about child tax credits. Let's listen.
What did you mean when you said when a woman works outside the home, it's resulting in, quote, the deterioration of family?
No,
and that we are avoiding, these are quotes. It was the title of the op-ed.
So this was 1981, first of all. So this was a long time ago. Number two, the Biden campaign to a child tax care credit itself. He was opposed to the tax credit being made to people making, I think, the equivalent today of over $88,000.
Right, which is middle class, squarely middle class. But the point he made in the op-ed, which is what disturbed me the most, is that he felt that he wasn't going to participate in middle class affordable childcare because it would lead to, quote, the deterioration of family, end of quote. And he went so far as to say parents were, quote, avoiding responsibility. I'm a mom who works outside the home for both my children. I'm the primary wage earner and the primary caregiver. And as a member of Congress, I had my second son, Henry, who was in the audience last night. And to say to me that I'm somehow avoiding my responsibility because I had access to affordable daycare, to say to me that I'm somehow deteriorating the family, the reason why it's relevant today, and let's be very clear, is because we have a misogynist in the White House right now who's done an all-out assault on women's reproductive freedom, on demeaning and devaluing women, bragging about sexual assault. Women have been marching against Trump since he got elected globally, and we took back the House in 2018 because of the power and ferocity of women running and supporting them and turning out to vote. So we just need to know that the nominee does not believe that today. And so I very simply asked him, what did you mean when you said that? And do you still believe it today? And he couldn't answer the question. He finally said, oh, I never believed it. Well, those were his words. He wrote them.
But fact checkers do say that he wasn't singling out women, that they should stay home.
Yeah, but
he was talking about parents at this particular income bracket.
Give me a break. Who in 1981 was going to be staying home to watch the children. It's obvious. It's typically, in most families, women. Women are still primary caregivers.
It was, though, in the 70s for a period of time, Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden was a single parent for a
Understood,
long
and
time.
we respect him as a parent. We respect him as a public servant. I just wanted clarity about what he meant when he said it then, and does he still believe it today? Because we need women of America who must work. Most of us must work, and many of us want to help our communities, whether we're nurses or doctors or whether we're teachers or members of Congress. To say that our work is somehow deteriorating the family, I think is an outrageous statement, but worse, to say we're avoiding responsibility. So I just need to know that our nominee is going to be a champion of national paid leave, affordable daycare, universal pre-K. I'm the only presidential candidate who's actually laid out a full plan on a family bill of rights to make sure all people who want to be parents can be parents, that children can be provided for in those first few years of life.
Let's listen to his response to that attack last night.
You came to Syracuse University with me and said it was wonderful. I'm passionate about the concern, making sure women are treated equally. I don't know what's happened except that you're now running for president.
What's your response to that? Basically, he's saying that you used to be an ally of his. You used to believe in the things that he believes in or that he says he believes in, and that now you've changed.
I'm still an ally of Vice President Biden, and I'm still someone who admires him and values him. I don't think he answered the question. And he was just avoiding my request of, what did you mean when you said it? Do you still believe it today? Because, again, we need a nominee who's going to be a champion for women. Women are the heart and soul of this party.
Your campaign has said that you had one of your best fundraising days in a long time over the last 24 hours. I do want to know, if a candidate is not on the debate stage in September, is that candidate still viable? Because you have not yet qualified for the September debates.
Well, that's why I'm on your show. And hopefully your viewers go to KirstenGillibrand.com and send that $1 to guarantee my spot on the September debate stage.
But if not, I'm not asking about you, any candidate. If a candidate's not on that stage, can they be a viable candidate?
We don't really know, but I just know I'm going to make that debate stage, especially with the help of your viewers.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, great to have you. Thanks so much for stopping by New Day. Great to talk to you. We'll be watching very closely what happens
Thanks,
now.
Senator.
Thank you.
Coming up in just a few minutes, two of the other candidates who were on that stage tonight, so many getting attention this morning, Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. They will join us.